What's up, superhero fans? Welcome to another installment of Supes Disputes, the show where I sit down with producer, talent manager, mega fan, and industry insider Brad Lambert, and we come together, break down the most trending superhero news, and debate the most divisive superhero topics. On today's episode, we are not joined alone. Today, we have the wonderful Taya Miller, a well-known content creator on the TikTok platform, and now she's on Instagram, YouTube. She's on everywhere. So make sure to go check out her content. Links will be in the description of this video. Guys, right before we get into talking about the main topic of today's video and debating the other topics that we have scheduled for the rest of the episode, I just want to give a huge shout out to the new merch I just dropped. The new merch that I just dropped is all the proceeds of this merch are going towards the GoFundMe that I started on the night that Chadwick Boseman passed away. And of course, you guys can see it's like the Supes logo with the Black Panther colors. And again, the t-shirt is on wearesupes.com. You can get it in the description of this video. And all the proceeds of the shirt will go towards the GoFundMe, so like that we can reach our goal to raise money for colon cancer research. Now, with that out the way, it's time to hop into today's show. The first topic that we have laid out for today's show is something that literally dropped an hour ago. Something that dropped out of nowhere. I did not wake up today thinking that Marvel was going to unveil their next big bad of the MCU. With that being said, new reports have it that Jonathan Majors has been cast as Kang the Conqueror in Ant-Man 3. For those of you who don't know Kang the Conqueror is a major time travel villain. So I feel like this villain was kind of inevitable with the events of Avengers Endgame and all the time travel they did in that movie. But Kang the Conqueror is a time travel villain. He goes around conquering alternate timelines, alternate realities. And it's also important to note that he is the distant son of Reed Richards. Mr. Fantastic, the leader of the Fantastic Four, Kang is his distant son from the future. So now it looks like Kang is going to be in Ant-Man 3. Again, it makes sense. Ant-Man is the person who brought time travel to the MCU. So, Brad, what are your thoughts on Kang coming to the MCU?
I told you, Marvel was sitting on some news last time we chatted, so here we go. I can't wait. And what's that quote in Endgame? Tony goes, when you mess with time, sometimes time messes back.
Yes, sir. Oh my gosh, Taya, your thoughts on Kang coming to the MCU? Again,
bro, I don't know anything about it. I'm excited to see what he brings. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, Kang isn't that well known as a villain. This is a guy from the comics. He's not as well known as Thanos, Doctor Doom, Magneto, the major Marvel villains we're used to seeing. So I'm actually super excited that Marvel is shedding some light on the characters that don't get that much love on the big screen in the movies. And, you know, once I heard the news that Kang was coming to the MCU, he's going to be in Ant-Man 3, everything just, it made sense for me. Like something snapped in my head. It made sense for me. This is how they're going to introduce the Fantastic Four. I mean, one of the theories that first came to my head is, what if, because Kang is the distant son of Reed Richards, what if the Fantastic Four come from the future and they come to the main timeline to help the Avengers stop Kang? And then they stay in the main timeline. It's something that can definitely happen. And again, because Ant-Man is all about time travel, it makes sense. But Kang is just, he's too big of a villain to be an Ant-Man villain. So Brad, do you think he's going to be the main villain of Ant-Man 3? Or do you think he's going to pull kind of like a Thanos role in Guardians of the Galaxy where he just pops up very quickly and then he comes in an upcoming Marvel movie?
I don't think they would have announced it if he had a end credit scene-esque role in that film. He may not be the main villain in Ant-Man 3, but I do think he's going to have a significant portion involvement, if you will, in that film.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, like you said, if they were going to only have Kang to be like at the end of this movie, they wouldn't have announced this. This would have been something we would have all been talking about when Ant-Man 3 came out. But it looks like Kang is going to be, again, one of the big bads of this movie, and he's just too big of a villain to only be contained in an Ant-Man solo film. So again, I think Kang will probably end the movie defeating Ant-Man and Wasp, and then again he'll become a bigger threat, conquering, you know, the little portion of the MCU that the Avengers are accustomed to. So
and potentially too, maybe this lights a fire under Ant-Man and the rest of the remaining Avengers to reassemble.
Again, like they learned in Avengers Infinity War, when they're separated, they're gonna lose. They only win where they're together. So again, that kind of now that you said that, it kind of brings the thought to my head of what if Ant-Man kind of plays a very similar role to the way he played in Endgame, which is to reassemble the Avengers. In Endgame, he came out of nowhere, assembled everyone, and now it looks like with the way things are playing out, he could do that once again.
And maybe he brings in his daughter Cassie.
Stature's
Yep.
coming. She's
Young
coming.
Avengers.
Young Avengers. They're definitely going to set up Young Avengers as well, so that's coming. But, you know, now that we know that Kang is coming for sure, this isn't something that's up for debate. This isn't something that's speculation. Kang is coming. My theory is that after the events of Avengers Endgame, I actually went back. When I heard this news, I went back to Avengers Endgame and I watched the scene where Captain America was preparing to take the stones back in time. Hulk specifically told him that if he didn't return the stones to their proper timelines, he'll open up a bunch of nasty alternative realities. Again, after Endgame, I think we all understand that there was so much that went on behind the scenes with Cap's journey to taking back the stones that we didn't get to see. We all have been clamoring for the idea of a Captain America Disney Plus series that shows us Cap bringing the stones back to their proper timelines.
Yes.
So I think that's definitely something that will play a role with the introduction of Kang. I think Cap messed up and maybe didn't place a stone in the right reality, and now Kang is coming.
I would absolutely hate that though, like having Cap go out that way where he made a mistake. That would break me.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not a good look on Cap.
Yeah.
But you know, it is what it is. It's just an easy way to set up Kang because he's a time travel villain.
Maybe not necessarily he messed up, but wouldn't it be cool to have a flashback sequence in Ant-Man 3 where you do see Chris Evans, Captain America, going back in time and Kang, you know, in the background watching this intruder, right? This breacher, you know, and that's what kind of gets him going.
It makes sense. Again, Kang's a smart guy. He's very obsessed with power and conquering alternate realities. So again, I'm pretty sure that after the events of Avengers Endgame, the Avengers probably messed up one of the realities he was in the middle of conquering. So now he's coming to get his revenge. Now he's coming to conquer the main timeline of the MCU. And man, oh man, am I excited to see Kang enter the MCU, the Avengers assemble. What do you think Captain Marvel is going to think of Kang when he's coming to take over everything? Like, it's just going to be crazy. I cannot wait to see not only the Avengers assemble, but the Young Avengers, the Fantastic Four, the X-Men. Marvel has so many more characters on their slate, and it's going to be interesting to see all of them come together to stop Kang. And I don't know, maybe he's teaming up with other villains in the Marvel universe to help conquer the universe.
I did hear that he's going to be one of the big bads moving forward. So that's exciting to hear nonetheless.
That's definitely exciting to hear. So guys, Kang is officially coming to the MCU. He's going to be one of the next big bads. And now there's no more time for speculation because now we know for certain. And Jonathan Majors is coming to play Kang. So I'm definitely excited to see that. Now, moving on to one of the main debate topics of the day. We're going to be debating who is the best Spider-Man. So Brad, who do you think is the best Spider-Man? And then we'll go over to Taya.
Who's the best Spider-Man? Like, out of all the ones that we've ever done?
Who is the best Spider-Man on the live-action setting between Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and Tom Holland? Who is the best Spider-Man?
Tom Holland.
Okay.
Tom Holland, hands down.
Okay. Now, explain to me, why is Tom Holland better than Andrew and Tobey?
Now, let me say this. I grew up with Tobey. The first Spider-Man who hit the big screen. Loved Tobey Maguire. I also really enjoyed Andrew Garfield. I thought he brought something different to the character. I really enjoyed his sarcasm and his wit and his dry humor. And his Spider-Man sequences were also the web swinging and the action sequences were well done. But there's something about Tom Holland where he meshes perfectly with both. He's the perfect balance between Tobey and Andrew. And then you add in the fact that he's part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which we've been able to see him interact with Tony Stark, Captain America, Black Panther, Winter Soldier. Like, all these iconic characters that we obviously didn't get with the other two. Iron Spider. We saw him in Avengers Endgame, Avengers Infinity War. There's just so much to that in making it a fuller character that he takes the cake for me, man.
So, Taya, who is the best Spider-Man?
I don't even know where to start with this. I have so much. Okay, so we're gonna start with this. So looking at the actors themselves, right? Tom Holland. Like Brad said, he's like the perfect mix of Toby and Andrew, and he just Supes. I see what you're doing with your face. I don't like it. Okay, but so Tom, right? Actor-wise, acting-wise,
Yes.
Tom is literally the perfect embodiment of Spider-Man, Peter Parker, even outside of just acting as Peter Parker.
100%.
But when you get to the storyline, that's when I get super iffy because, like, obviously, Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, like, we see more of like the traditional, like, pulled out of a comic book Spider-Man. When you get to Tom Holland, that's when it's like it's the MCU Spider-Man, you know? And I've heard a lot of people say that like they don't even consider the MCU Spider-Man as Spider-Man because it's so different, which I respect to an extent. But yeah. So that's where I'm at.
So, I don't even know where to start with
Hold on,
this.
before you go into your rebuttal, let me touch on what Taya said. Like we have to take into consideration that the MCU Spider-Man is also Sony's. So I would have loved to have seen what Marvel and Disney would have done with 100% control over that character. But I also like and appreciate the fact that we didn't have to relive the whole Uncle Ben dying again.
Yes.
So and that difference, the small tweaks that they made to the character is also for us fans to not have to relive the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. So yes, I agree with Taya and the people she referenced who think that, oh well, the narrative and the story of this Spider-Man's so different and da da da. But is it though? He got bit by a spider. Uncle Ben is dead. Like we just saw a different how it played out more so than him just being Spider-Man by himself for years and years and years and years and years. We saw him get literally recruited by Tony Stark to join the Avengers, which is something that, yes, in the comics we've seen, yes, in the animated series we've seen, but it's something that this is the first time we've ever seen. And it's just, I'm sorry, that is the coolest thing about this whole thing for me, where I do respect and love the other two, but having that experience of seeing that iconic character with the rest is something we won't experience again.
And I think it was like the perfect decision. Like Sony made choices, right? Like they could have gone with the Uncle Ben storyline and started with that, but they were like, no, we're gonna make it MCU Spider-Man. And I think it was like the perfect decision because having Tony Stark is such a big, like he was the first MCU movie that we had. And having him be such a big character and having Spider-Man be introduced under him, giving Spider-Man that importance in the MCU, you know? Because like if Spider-Man just like came under like Black Widow or something like that, we kind of would have been like, okay, like that's cool, whatever.
Yeah.
You know? But like Tony Stark, it really gave him that importance, which
it was cool to see Tony as that father figure, mentor. Like once again, something we haven't seen before. Mm-hmm. That was so cool, and everybody knows that I love Tony Stark, and I'm a huge Iron Man fan. So being a huge Iron Man fan and a Spider-Man fan, it was like the dream combo for me. And for Tony to have a child in a way with Peter and mentor him and raise him and help him become not only a good person but superhero, that was once again something we haven't seen before. And I think it was a really cool introduction to Peter's growth as a standalone hero, which we got to see for the most part in Far From Home, and we certainly will see in the next chapter in Spider-Man 3.
So before I body both of you right now, I want to preface this by saying I love Tom Holland's Spider-Man in Captain America Civil War, Avengers Infinity War, and Avengers Endgame. The Russo brothers are freaking geniuses. We all know that. But for me, one of the most significant things they have done in the Marvel Cinematic Universe is one, introduce Spider-Man, and two, continue his character on the biggest scale that the MCU has ever seen. In Captain America Civil War, I remember I watched that movie and I came out of it saying Tom Holland was the best Spider-Man. Tom Holland was the best Spider-Man after I just saw him in Captain America Civil War. And a bunch of people were criticizing me for saying that because we only saw him in like 2 scenes. Now, don't get me wrong. They were 2 of the greatest scenes of all time. But we only saw him in 2 scenes in Captain America Civil War. Then in Spider-Man Homecoming, we got a completely different Spider-Man. And in Spider-Man Far From Home, we got a completely different Spider-Man. So for me, one of the biggest issues that MCU Spider-Man has is the inconsistency between the directors and their visions for the character. It's clear to say that the Russo brothers have a completely different vision for Spider-Man than John Watts. It's something that we've seen time and time again. And you guys keep on saying, oh, we don't want to see the same thing over and over again. We don't want to see, the Uncle Ben story over and over again. And that's fair. In the MCU, they kind of made Iron Man Uncle Ben to Spider-Man. He was just that father figure. But for me, that's one of the biggest issues because Peter Parker is Spider-Man because of Uncle Ben. He is not Spider-Man because he likes it. He is not Spider-Man because it's fun. He's not Spider-Man because it's cool. He is Spider-Man because of Uncle Ben. And what happened to Uncle Ben, him feeling that guilt, now he feels a sense of responsibility that he owes it to Uncle Ben to show up and be Spider-Man. He wants to be in school. He wants to be with his love interest, whether it's MJ, Gwen Stacy, whoever it is. Spider-Man is completely based around the idea that he's doing this for Uncle Ben. That's why he's Spider-Man. He's not Spider-Man because he wants to impress Tony Stark. He's not Spider-Man because he wants to be an Avenger. And in the MCU, Spider-Man is almost a fanboy. I mean, let's just look at the inconsistencies. In Captain America Civil War, when we first saw Tom Holland's Spider-Man enter the frame, Tony Stark was in his house, in his like little 1-bedroom apartment, and he wasn't a fanboy of Tony Stark. The biggest superhero in the world was in his room. And Tony Stark admitted that he had been watching Peter, and yet Peter still didn't admit that he was Spider-Man. Tony Stark literally still found his Spider-Man outfit, and Peter still didn't admit that he was Spider-Man because 1, he valued his secret identity. 2, he didn't care about Tony Stark being Iron Man. He didn't see that as something that's cool because he just wants to be Peter Parker. He just wants to be a kid that goes to school. He doesn't want that lifestyle. Now, don't get me wrong. He got dragged into that lifestyle, and he found it pretty cool. And I think that's where I kind of have an issue. I have an issue with that because Peter Parker in the MCU hates school. We saw it in Spider-Man Homecoming. There was a montage of him going through school, and he's bored. He's just waiting for that bell to ring. But that's not Spider-Man. Spider-Man loves school. That's where Peter Parker wants to be. He doesn't want to be fighting crime. He doesn't want to be putting himself in danger. He wants to be in school. Now, all right, he wants to be Spider-Man. Let him be Spider-Man. But even then, with the Spider-Man movies that we've seen with Tom Holland's Spider-Man, he's not even just Spider-Man. He's Spider-Man and company. He's Spider-Man and Iron Man. He's Spider-Man and Happy. He has so much help. It's literally disgusting. Like, I can literally name all the scenes where Tom Holland's Spider-Man gets saved. The lake scene in Spider-Man Homecoming. The ferry scene in Spider-Man Homecoming. The shocker fight in Spider-Man Homecoming. In Spider-Man Far From Home, don't get me wrong, he didn't have Iron Man, but in that final battle, he had Happy assisting him by keeping his friends safe. He had assistance. So Taya,
I'm gonna interject, and I'm gonna say that I do think that it's really cool that we get to see him develop into like being his own character, because like obviously he was right underneath Tony Stark, right? And obviously we're seeing him with Happy and stuff like that. But like in the next few movies, or however many I don't know how many they're making, but like I'm really hoping to see Peter Parker move to be able to be by himself. You know what I mean? And like being able to watch that development because he's needing people less and less. 100%. And so if we ever get to a point where he doesn't need anyone, that's going to be so freaking cool. Like we got to witness that, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I agree with you. And that's why I'm looking forward to Spider-Man 3, because as we see Peter's Spider-Man progressing, he's getting less and less help. But Spider-Man shouldn't have the amount of help he has in the first place. I mean, with all the irresponsible decisions that Peter makes in the MCU, there's barely any consequences with those decisions. The only real consequence that Peter has faced is having his secret identity exposed to the world. That's the only real consequence that he's faced. When in reality, we've seen Tom Holland's Spider-Man in 5 different movies, which is the same amount of times we've seen Tobey and Andrew's Spider-Man combined, and he's only had one consequence. It's ridiculous. And, you know, when it comes to the character of Spider-Man, his character isn't based on the powers he has. His character's ultimate power is his ability to endure and overcome. And Spider-Man, more than anyone, should be the character that suffers the most, because how he overcomes those situations, how he overcomes those consequences that he faces because of his past actions, that's how he grows as a character. That's why he's such an amazing character, because he continues to grow through those consequences. In Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, we saw that character go through many consequences. Was he irresponsible? Yes, but guess what? He suffered based off of the actions that he made. And he lost Uncle Ben, he lost Captain Stacy, he lost Gwen Stacy, and who in reality, who has Spider-Man really lost in the MCU? And it's because of his fault. He lost Iron Man. That wasn't his fault. That was because it was almost destiny for Iron Man to die in Avengers Endgame. But because of Peter's actions, what real consequences has he faced besides his secret identity being revealed to the world? He hasn't faced any. When the character of Spider-Man is solely based on the consequences he faces. So if we look at Toby, if we look at Andrew, those characters suffered. Those characters were put in that situation where...
Time out, bro. Time out.
Go.
Okay, first off, I'm going to start at the beginning in Civil War, okay? When
Civil
Tony
War.
shows up to his one-bedroom apartment, as you so eloquently put, he can barely speak. He's just like, what's up, man? Like, and he is fangirling in a way, because he's just like, Tony Stark's in my house. This is weird. He knows he's Iron Man, and he's also like a 14, 15-year-old kid who anyone in that situation would also be fangirling, straight up. Tony comes into his room. He does the whole thing. He even says in the roundabout way the same quote. When you have these abilities and you do nothing and somebody gets hurt, then that's on you.
Mm-hmm.
Same kind of thing. Okay, so Uncle Ben definitely has that gusto, that impact on his life of him being Spider-Man. Because he was Spider-Man long before Tony came into play. Okay, so he was saving everybody, making a bunch of mistakes. We don't know what mistakes he made. Okay, so he gets drawn into Civil War, and then we have Spider-Man Homecoming. And in the start of that film, he's geeked. He wants to be that hero that you're saying. He's not being Spider-Man for himself. It's a responsibility. He has to go out into the public and be the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. So yes, he is doing his schoolwork, but he's also excited after experiencing what he experienced in Berlin to come back to New York and do it there. And he's constantly waiting for Tony or Happy or somebody to hit him up so he can go and do that again, because he's never experienced that before. All he does is, save old ladies from robbers who steal their purses and bikes and shit. So, like, yeah, and in Homecoming, he's eager to do something else, do something bigger, because that's something he's never experienced before. Now, if he didn't do Civil War, he probably would do exactly what you're saying and living his casual, normal life as saving the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, right? In the first, 15 minutes of that film, he goes to the bank and he fucks up. The bank explodes, buildings across the side explode. We don't know how many people died, but there were consequences to him fucking up. Then Tony takes a bigger interest. Hold on. Tony takes a bigger interest in what he's doing. He starts to watch him because he's starting to get a little reckless. And yes, Tony saved his ass on the ferry. And if he didn't, hundreds of people would have died. And as a 15-year-old, if Tony wasn't a part of his life, hundreds of people would have died on the boat. And there's your consequences, right? And guess what? He took his suit away. He's like, you're done. Consequence. You fucked up. Your suit is now gone forever. And guess what? Peter then had to reevaluate and say, I need to cool it and be a little bit more specific and intelligent with my decision making.
I definitely think that was like a choice that the MCU decided to make, because like Toby and Andrew, they showed them messing up, right? And so then the audience was kind of like, oh, well, maybe I don't like Peter, or maybe I don't like Spider-Man that much, you know what I mean? But Tom Holland, the MCU has always been known for like lighthearted things, right? So if Spider-Man in the MCU would have ended up killing 100 people, I think that would have ruined the audience's like image of Spider-Man, and I don't think that they wanted to do that. So I definitely think like whether it was a good or bad choice, I'll leave that up to you guys, but like I do think that it was a choice that they made for that reason.
100%.
But they chose to put him in that predicament. They chose to put him in that situation where he had to be saved by Iron Man. That's exactly what I'm saying. You're talking about the bank scene where he blew up, you know, Mr. Delmore's shop. Mr. Delmore didn't die. The cat didn't die. And we saw in Spider-Man Far From Home that the entire deli shop was perfectly back to normal. No consequences. You're saying that when Tony took his suit away, that was a consequence? Peter Parker should never feel like a suit is what makes him Spider-Man. That's not Spider-Man.
That was the message that Tony gave him. He literally said that. If you're nothing without the suit, then you shouldn't have it. He said the exact same thing. So you're making the case exactly.
But that's it. That's what Peter said before that. Peter said, "I'm nothing without this suit." Peter Parker should never feel that way in the first place.
Exactly, which is why he beat Vulture with his homemade piece of shit suit.
Yeah. But at that point in the movie, he felt that Tony Stark giving him that suit is what made him Spider-Man. The Peter Parker, the Spider-Man I know and love, would never feel that Tony Stark taking his suit away would stop him from being Spider-Man.
But he was already Spider-Man before Tony gave him that upgraded suit.
Exactly. So why would he say that? Why would he say, "I'm nothing without this suit"?
Because he's a 15-year-old kid and he just got $1 billion suit from Tony Stark. You would say the same thing too if you were left with a homemade piece of shit suit and you got $1 billion suit from Tony Stark, which has an AI and everything else in it.
No, and I still have powers like Spider-Man.
Yeah, but bro, you're so like honed in on comparing it to the comics, to the other Spider-Man movies.
The character itself.
Yeah, but the characters evolve over time, bro.
Okay,
that's
but what makes the character the character? It's the foundation. It's what he stands for. It's the morals he has. That's what makes the character the character. If we look at someone like Joker, like Joaquin Phoenix's Joker, you've said it time and time again. There's no indication that that's Joker. That could just be a crazy guy who dresses up like a clown.
100%.
And you're very right on that. So if we take that same lens and apply it to Tom Holland's Spider-Man, what really makes him Spider-Man? What are the morals? What are the foundations of the character? Uncle Ben's virtually non-existent in the MCU, and that is the whole reason why he's Spider-Man.
I think the big difference that we see between Tom Holland and Andrew and Toby and even the comics is the motivation behind. I think that's what you're getting at, is that like Tom Holland's Spider-Man, his motivation it's not the same. It's not because Uncle Ben died. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and like if we apply the same thing to other characters, like the reason Batman is so like that he can stop, you know, what happened to him as a child from happening to anyone else. In a very similar way, that's Peter Parker's motivations, to stop what happened to him with Uncle Ben from happening to anyone else. But in the MCU, he's more focused on becoming an Avenger. And don't get me wrong, I would be the same way. I would be the same way. If I was Tom Holland Spider-Man, I would be the same way. But guess what? I'm not Spider-Man. I'm Matthew Ramos. Peter Parker is a completely different character. And that's not the Peter Parker that I know and love. And that's just not the character of Spider-Man.
He was bit by a spider. Uncle Ben is dead. He started out being the crusader he was because of what Uncle Ben told him, which was the quote in Civil War. Then his path changed because Tony and the Avengers and Thanos and everything else, his story changed.
It's just not as focused on Uncle Ben as I think a lot of Spider-Man fans would want it to be.
Correct. Now, if he pops up in Spider-Man 3 in a flashback and you see that moment, that iconic moment, with great power comes great responsibility.
They would never do that. They would do it with Tony Stark. They would do it with Tony Stark instead of Uncle Ben. And
but that's the point, man. It's a different version. Yes.
But Tony Stark can never be Uncle Ben. I'm sick and tired of people saying that, oh, Tony Stark is like his Uncle Ben in the MCU, and that's better because Tony Stark is Iron Man. He's a well-known superhero. He has a lot of experience.
He's not Uncle Ben.
Peter, he's mentoring Spider-Man. But exactly, Tony Stark could never be what Uncle Ben is to Spider-Man. And that's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. But I'm not saying he is. But he was.
So why do they use Tony in the MCU as Uncle Ben?
To do something different. We've seen the other shit 100 times.
They set it up so many times. It's like they set it up in Civil War. In Spider-Man Homecoming, Peter literally told Ned, yeah, I can't tell Aunt May because of, you know, what she went through. What does she go through? Because if we look at Spider-Man, what does she go through? Because if we look at Spider-Man Far From Home, she's not hesitant at all to be flirting with Happy. Peter's suitcase got blown up, and they literally laugh it off when Peter gets back from London. So I don't know about you guys, but if my father died and I take his suitcase on vacation and that suitcase gets lost, I'm not going to laugh it off when my mom comes to say, you know, where's your suitcase? I'm not going to laugh that off how they did in the movies. Oh, Aunt May isn't even Aunt May. I'm sorry to say. She feels more like a babysitter than she does actual family. If we look at the character of Aunt May, Marvel literally just said, again, I get that they're trying to be different, but Marvel literally just said, all right, let's make Aunt May very attractive so like that we're different from the past iterations. And we're good.
Shocking concept.
And we're good. And we're good. Because again, very similar to Uncle Ben, Aunt May is Peter's rock. When things go south, Peter always retreats back to Aunt May to lift them up. In every iteration of the Spider-Man that I know and love, and the Spider-Man that we know and love, Aunt May is his rock. The only like emotional scene that Peter has ever had with Aunt May is the scene in Spider-Man Homecoming where after Peter lost his suit, he gets back wearing the Tony Stark shirt that Tony gave him, and he's like crying because he lost the Stark internship. She doesn't even give him any advice and says that he smells and that he should go take a shower.
I agree with that. I've never even like thought about that before.
Aunt May is the person that saves Spider-Man. It's not Iron Man. It's not Happy. I get that's how they made it in the movies, but they could still do that in the movies and still build a strong relationship between the character of Aunt May and Spider-Man. Instead, in the MCU, they only used Aunt May for thirst traps. In Spider-Man Homecoming, they did it with the waiter guy. In Civil War, they did it with, Tony and Aunt May and that. They kind of continued that over in Homecoming as well, even though we didn't get any scenes between Tony and Aunt May. And then in Spider-Man Far From Home, they did it with Happy. So it's like, what is the purpose of Aunt May in the MCU here? Is it just to babysit Spider-Man to give him like a house to live in? Like, what is the purpose of Aunt May? Because Aunt May carries no significance to Peter's life in the MCU. When stuff goes sideways, he doesn't call Aunt May. He calls Tony. He calls Happy. Where is Aunt May? And you would think that with the absence of Uncle Ben in the MCU, that they triple down on the relationship between Peter and Aunt May. Aunt May is always worried about where Peter is because she lost Uncle Ben. Now she's super worried about Peter when Peter is not in her presence. In the MCU, she likes that Peter's Spider-Man and she uses it for charity. That is one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen anyone do to a Spider-Man franchise, is to use the character of Aunt May, have her be okay with Peter being Spider-Man, and then using him for personal gain for charity. I could go on and on about that.
Do you think Marvel's just so focused on making every character likable that they don't want to give them any negative qualities?
Tony has a ton of negative qualities.
Okay, that's true.
Yeah, Tony has a ton of negative qualities, and that's what makes him a great character. Captain America is my favorite character in the MCU, but I'm willing to say that Tony Stark has the most compelling arc because he started off as a douchebag. He started off as a guy that we're not supposed to like, but we ended up liking.
Yeah.
So,
I think Thor has a great arc as well.
So again, I just don't understand why they don't apply those arcs to characters like Aunt May, Spider-Man, that have had those arcs within the entire existence of these characters. And especially after something like Avengers Infinity War, something that literally changed the entire universe of the MCU. You would think that when Peter gets back, when Hulk snaps and Peter comes back, you would think that Aunt May is a little more worried about Peter. You would think that she holds Peter a lot closer to her because she cares a lot about him. For me, one of the biggest mistakes Marvel kind of made in Spider-Man Far From Home is having Aunt May, having her be dusted with the other characters that I love. I believe that they could have completely changed the character of Aunt May from Spider-Man Homecoming to Spider-Man Far From Home by having Peter get dusted, she stays alive, and then for 5 years, she mourns Peter's death the same way she mourned Uncle Ben's death. 100%. For me, that would have added so much more significance to the relationship between Peter and Aunt May.
I agree.
Again, they didn't do that. Look at the relationship between Peter and Aunt May in the Andrew series. Look at the relationship between Peter and Aunt May in the Toby series. It's integral to the character. And that's what I'm trying to say, that none of the relationships that Peter has, the relationship he has with Uncle Ben, the relationship he has with Aunt May, none of them carry any weight. None of them carry any meaning. The only relationship that carried meaning to Peter is the relationship between Tony Stark and Spider-Man. And don't get me wrong, that was perfect. That was an amazing relationship. That's one of the best things they've done in the MCU. But Aunt May is also important to Spider-Man. Uncle Ben is also important to Spider-Man. And
100%.
those characters are non-existent in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
It's just a matter of priorities. Because of the introduction of Tony as the mentor, the father figure, he spent a lot of time with him. He spent a lot of time with Happy. He spent a lot of time with Gwyneth Paltrow. Like, we've seen those interactions. I mean, the announcement where Pepper and Tony and Happy, they were going to announce him as the new Avenger at the end of Homecoming. He said no. He said no. I want to stay a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, which is more in line with what you're talking about.
Yeah, I like that decision.
Yeah, but
that's what
that's an arc, man. Like, the Spider-Man at the beginning of Homecoming wanted to be an Avenger more than anything in the world. But after everything he experienced in Homecoming, he made the decision to stay the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Now, if he decided at the end to be an Avenger right out of the gate, I would agree with you. Like, I would say, yeah, that's not, characteristic of Peter Parker Spider-Man. Like, that's not him. But that arc, that journey that he had to go on to experience those things, that arc of him going through Infinity War and Endgame, losing Tony, Far From Home, mourning Tony, saying, I'm not Tony, I can't be Tony, and Happy telling him, no, you're not, no one can, you have to be yourself. And that's what he did. He beat Mysterio by himself. And yeah, Happy saved his friends from school, whatever. But dude, every hero has had help at some capacity, period. Tony with Jarvis, Bucky helping Cap. There's always help. And that just goes to the main motto in life. Nobody gets anywhere by themselves. So, like, I mean, we can talk about this all day, but I feel like the Spider-Man that we have right now is different than the ones we've had in the past. But that doesn't make it bad. It's the open-minded nature of looking at all the pieces on the table and saying, okay, when you piece this together, this makes sense. Could they have done certain things differently? Absolutely. But let's see where the trilogy ends and where this character plays out over this next film with his relationship with Aunt May, with his relationship with MJ and Uncle Ben. Like, dude, I expect shit to hit the fan in this next film. I expect people to die in this next film. Your consequences will be in this next film because he's now being hunted by everybody because everybody knows who he is.
Again, and that's why I'm so excited for this third film, because again, as this character is progressing, he's feeling more and more, he's getting more and more consequences. But like, why didn't he have these consequences just from the beginning? Why didn't he have them from the get? In Spider-Man Far From Home, he literally had 2 conversations with Mysterio. And after 2 conversations with Mysterio, he gives up the last possession that Tony Stark left for him. Again, this isn't even talking about Uncle Ben and the relationship between Peter and Uncle Ben. This is talking about the relationship the most important relationship in the MCU, which is the relationship between Peter and Tony Stark.
Yeah,
why
classic case of overthinking.
Exactly. Why? Where is that sense of responsibility? If Tony Stark dying is supposed to be Uncle Ben's death in the MCU, where is that sense of responsibility?
The responsibility was Tony would want me to pass this on to someone who would take Tony's place.
What?
Like, I'm just 15. Why would I have this responsibility? So he gave me the responsibility to pass it on to someone who should have the responsibility, which is a 37-year-old man who's highly experienced in it, the next big thing. He's a kid. He fucked up. But he was doing it from a good place. But he made a mistake, and the consequences were almost very, very bad.
Almost. Again, what came from all of this? He got Edith back at the end of the movie, and yeah, all right, his secret identity was exposed to the world, but that had nothing to do with Edith. That had everything to do with Mysterio and Mysterio's master plan. Mysterio had that planned from the beginning.
Yeah, but Mysterio destroyed a ton of different cities, including London, in the process of his fight with Spider-Man. So the consequences were there. We're just
Exactly.
not keeping a tally. We'll have Ross come back and sit everybody down at the table like he did and just let everybody know, hey, Spider-Man, you fucked up and killed fucking 10,000 people in London. Maybe you should do better. That's not the MCU. That's what Taya's talking about. Like,
But that's
they're
exactly what
not
I'm
going to do
saying.
that.
Why are they so scared to let this Spider-Man suffer? Why are they so scared to like
Bro, he got dusted.
have something
Sam.
be realistic?
He got dusted and then lost Tony Stark.
And when he got dusted, no one actually took it seriously because we all knew Spider-Man was coming back.
Oh my God, are you honestly gonna? This is the hill you want to die on right now?
What do you mean?
You're gonna tell me that meant nothing to you, seeing him turn to dust on the big screen?
Did Tom Holland kill that scene? Yes, he did. But did anyone actually think Spider-Man was dead?
Didn't they announce Far From Home in between Infinity War and Endgame? Like, I'm pretty sure.
We all knew he's coming back, but it's still. We're not talking about what's the slate of Marvel Studios. Yeah. We're talking about in that moment.
Yeah.
It was perfect. It was perfect. Nobody expected half the Avengers to disappear.
But it's a fake consequence. All right, he died. Now he's back. Now everything's back to normal and Far From Home. You would think that after half of all the population of the world, you would think that after they come back, that there would be something different about the world. There's literally nothing different. Everyone came back. Like, there was kids spawning in like their school band. What? How is everything just back to normal?
But Peter learns. He learns. Just like Toby and Andrew. They had consequences. They learned. Everything else pretty much remotely goes back to normal, right?
I mean, but what did Peter learn? Like, that's what I'm trying to get at.
He's learning responsibility.
That wasn't anyone's fault, though.
It was Star-Lord's fault, but that's a different conversation.
Low-key Tony's fault, too, but...
Don't you dare put that on Tony. He had the glove coming off, bro. Like, come on, man.
Yeah. Star-Lord sold out. Nah, Doctor Strange's fault. I would die on that hill any day of the week. Doctor Strange could have opened up a portal and dropped Star-Lord to, like, a different planet, but he didn't. Why?
He could have opened up a portal and dropped Thanos to a different...
Dude, chop off the arm.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I mean...
Why?
Because it's not a good storytelling. It's not enough for a full film, bro.
Yeah, I know.
That's why.
There has to be the plot holes. These films are still amazing, though.
Yeah, but, like we could take the entire MCU and condense it to 5 movies if you want, but no one would be happy with that. I prefer 20 some films over 5. Any day of the week.
Yeah, and Endgame too. There's even more plot holes in Endgame than there is in Infinity War, but Endgame is still my favorite movie of all time, biggest movie of all time, and I think you guys can agree. Why?
Yeah.
Because it was a movie that didn't hold back. It was a movie that gave us all types of fan moments, brought our dreams into reality. I never thought...
so like Spider-Man being in the MCU?
Yeah. Like, I can never imagine Endgame without Spider-Man in the MCU. And Spider-Man being in the MCU isn't the problem. It's the way they handle the character in the individual movies.
You can't have it both ways, bro. You can't have it both ways. You can't have, I want the standalone Spider-Man story, but then also have him in the MCU. You can't have both.
That's what we're getting right now.
No, we're getting the MCU version.
Yeah, but he also has his solo films that take place with his own stories.
In the MCU.
Yeah.
Which is why you have Happy, which is why you have Tony making appearances.
Yeah.
Which is why Aunt May gets third base.
That's what I'm saying. My criticism is, why do they put so much more emphasis on someone like Happy than they do on Aunt May?
Because Happy is part of his Avenger.
Like, look at someone like Black Panther. Look at the movie Black Panther. Black Panther, he's connected to the rest of the world. He's connected to all the other heroes, but he has his core people around him, and they put emphasis on the relationship between him and those characters. They put an emphasis...
Because those characters are involved in his superhero duties, bro.
That's who the MCU wanted Spider-Man's circle to be, is Happy and Tony and Aunt May.
Exactly.
Aunt May is not out there fighting Thanos, bro. She wouldn't be able to give him any viable information to help him, but Happy and Tony and Pepper and that crew will and did. That's why. So you want Aunt May to make him a new suit after it got destroyed in Far From Home?
No.
He went to Happy.
when he gets his butt whooped, I want Aunt May to be the one to bring him back up. That's what I want. I want
So
Aunt May.
hold on.
Which is
You
fair.
wanted a
That's fair.
sequence of him calling Aunt May. Aunt May, what should I do? What should I do? Call Happy. All right, cool. Happy, come get me. I'm in the Netherlands. Like that would have made you happy?
No. What I'm saying, the thing is that Peter doesn't really get his butt whooped.
Bro,
He
he got
only
hit by
got
a
his
fucking train.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. One
Like-
time. One time.
Like, what the hell, man?
And again, it's an unpredictable situation. Like, you can't do anything about that. You cannot connect Peter to anyone else other than Happy
the
and
best
Iron
thing.
Man.
He got the
Why
best
would they put him in
piece
that
of advice.
situation?
Bro, he got the best piece of advice in Far From Home from Aunt May.
What piece of
Peter
advice?
Tingle.
Oh my god.
That is the
Peter
worst.
No, don't even get me
thing
started. No, yes.
Peter
Dude,
Tingle.
that is
I
so.
agree.
That's almost worse than
Use the
having
Peter
Hulk.
Tingle.
That's almost worse than having Hulk say the word "dab" in a Marvel movie.
Bro, like that was advice from Aunt May. Use the spider sense, and that's what he did, and that's how he beat Mysterio.
Yeah, that was great. That's one thing I will say that. Again, the action sequences in Far From Home are the greatest action sequences we've ever seen in a Spider-Man movie. But
That
again,
shit was insane.
you tear all of that off. You tear off the things that happen, the events that happen, the action, everything. What is the core of the character? And the core of Tom Holland's Spider-Man isn't aligned with the Spider-Man we know and love. It's a completely different version. And I get that. It's a completely different version. But it's inaccurate to what the character is and what the character is all about and the characters that surround Spider-Man. Any final thoughts before we move on who's the best Spider-Man?
So who do you think, acting wise, is the best Spider-Man?
Oh, Andrew Garfield. That's not even a question.
Okay.
Andrew Garfield was the best actor and had that best acting moments in any Spider-Man movie. I mean, the death of Gwen Stacy? Are you kidding me? I saw that scene and I was depressed for like 2 weeks after watching that movie. Like, Andrew just made me feel so connected to that character, to Gwen Stacy, to Aunt May, to his dad and his parents. He made me feel so connected to those movies because of the way he brought that character to life and just cared about the character. Like, Andrew is a true fan that just truly loves the character of Spider-Man. That's something we all know. I mean, his first appearance as Spider-Man was in Comic-Con, dressed up as Spider-Man. So Andrew was someone who just loved the character deeply, and you could see it with the way he acted as the character. How about you, Taya? Who do you think is the best actor, live-action Spider-Man?
I feel so basic saying it, but actually Tom Holland. I will say though, Andrew Garfield, him and Emma Stone's chemistry on
The
screen
best.
was
The
it was
best.
amazing.
The
It was
best.
so good.
best.
I wish so badly that Tom Holland and Zendaya could capture that a little better, but
I'm excited to see what that looks like in Spider-Man 3, though.
me too. Me too.
But again, let's look at the relationship between Zendaya and Tom Holland. Dude, they literally had Peter reveal his secret identity to her in the trailers. What is that? You would think that Peter revealing his secret identity to his love interest, which is Zendaya and Zendaya's MJ, you would think that would carry significance. You would think that would carry meaning. Remember how you felt, how chills were going down your back when Mary Jane saw Peter Parker as Spider-Man at the end of Spider-Man 2? Remember that?
That's also something that I've noticed is that Toby and Andrew, those films seemed almost more focused on the relation,
characters.
the romance instead. And Tom Holland's is more it's a superhero movie that has a he has a little fling or what, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Flings.
So
Accurate.
it definitely feels different that way.
Yeah. And again, just no meaning, no weight to that character. The characters around him and his story. But with that being said, now it's time to go a little macro. We're not talking about who's the best Spider-Man anymore. We're talking about the best Spider-Man movie. Brad, what do you think is the best Spider-Man movie of all time?
Man, I'm going to have to go with the OG Spider-Man 2.
OG Spider-Man 2? And why do you think so? There's just so many amazing things to appreciate from that movie. I think it's one of the greatest comic book films of all time. But what stood out to that movie to you more than any other Spider-Man film?
I think the script, the story, the dialogue. I mean, everything about it was spot on. The character arc, the action sequences, it was ahead of its time. That's for sure. It had those memorable moments. That train sequence for me, iconic, especially when Spidey gets thrown through like the overpass and he like contorts his body to go through those like little slits.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, just like the creativity of that was just really well done. So I'd have to go Spider-Man 2 for sure. But I'm not gonna lie, I really enjoyed Far From Home. Those action sequences, especially the dream nightmare kind of illusion sequences, just insane. And then that London sequence was just bananas. So I'm gonna say that Far From Home's a nice runner-up.
How about you, Taya?
So I'm gonna have to agree with Brad. I think the best one of all time is Spider-Man 2. But I will say that I'm probably gonna get roasted for this. It's fine. I thoroughly enjoyed Spider-Man 3. Like if I go back and rewatch one of those movies, it is Spider-Man 3.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Taya, let me take this over because I think Spider-Man 3 is the best Spider-Man movie of all time.
So good. It's so good.
So good. Let me explain why Spider-Man 3 is the best Spider-Man movie of all time, even though it gets so much hate. With that being the final movie to cap off the trilogy, to cap off Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man story, with the actual story of the movie, they took it back to the beginning with a character like Sandman. I love how they made Sandman, the killer of Uncle Ben. And that entire movie, the entire theme was forgiveness. We always have a choice. We can always forgive. If you look at a character like Venom, people like to say how they misused Venom in that movie, but Venom was supposed to be, a parallel character to Spider-Man. They literally used, the Venom design that we got in the movie, but they had a more comic accurate version of Venom that they were going to use for that film, but they chose not to because they wanted to establish that parallel structure between Eddie Brock and Venom and Peter Parker as Spider-Man. So there's just so many beautiful things to appreciate about this movie. Again, they took it back to the beginning with Sandman. They had beautiful parallel structure with the character of Venom. The exposition with Harry and the way Harry's story aligned with Peter's story in a very similar way. Harry's story was about forgiveness. Peter's story was about forgiveness. And it all came together so well. Again, it really emphasized that we always have a choice. The one thing that I really love about these Tobey Maguire Spider-Man films is that they always end with emphasizing the lesson. In the first Spider-Man movie with Tobey Maguire, that ending scene where he's walking off after blowing off Mary Jane and he's giving a monologue, that scene changed my life. I mean, I just love these Tobey Maguire Spider-Man films. And Spider-Man 3 ended in a very similar way where Peter is at Harry's funeral and he's giving a monologue about how we always have a choice. We can always choose to do what's right. Now, in Spider-Man 3, my only kind of criticism or bad part of that movie was just the acting on Kristen Dunst's Mary Jane. I just thought the acting was so weak on her character. But in that movie, I really liked how we got to see Peter and Mary Jane finally together and seeing the consequences and repercussions that they face as, Mary Jane is just a regular person and Peter Parker has to live his life as Peter Parker and as Spider-Man. So I really liked how in this movie we got to see the repercussions of their relationship and them actually being together. And again, the way they used Aunt May in this movie was perfect. Was she anywhere near Peter? No. But guess what? When Peter was having trouble with Mary Jane, he went to Aunt May and she gave him some amazing advice about forgiveness. And again, Aunt May didn't even know that Peter was Spider-Man. And that advice that she gave him about forgiveness, it played so well with the plot with Sandman and him being able to forgive Sandman. So I think the writing of Spider-Man 3 is amazing. I think the story itself, it carried so much weight. It carried more weight than any of the other Spider-Man movies we've seen so far. And when you just look at the ending of the film, what a massive action sequence to completely cap it off. It felt like it was just the grandest fight scene we've ever seen in a superhero movie at the time that it came out. And I remember watching and Peter's getting bashed by Sandman and then the reporter's saying, this could be the end of Spider-Man. And I just loved how in this Tobey Maguire Spider-Man trilogy, the whole city rallied behind Spider-Man. That's something that I really kind of miss in Tom Holland's Spider-Man world, even though he's in the MCU. The city isn't behind Spider-Man. We saw it in Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man and Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. Spider-Man is the beacon of hope for the city of New York. They rallied behind him. And people kind of criticize that because during an action sequence like the one we saw at the end of Spider-Man 3, why would people be rallying around that like if it was a concert? Doesn't make any sense. But I kind of dig it. It's something that I like. And I just love how the city kind of revolved around Spider-Man. And again, when Harry came back, showing that you can forgive. No matter what someone has done to you, you can forgive. And forgiveness is always the right choice. Again, Harry was the one who sacrificed himself, but he sacrificed himself to make Peter's character even better, because then Peter was able to forgive Sandman. And it just all correlated so well. It all played out so well. And I still get chills to this day when Tobey Maguire is like, oh, he's opening up the briefcase, and then you see him, and he's like with that red and blue, and then he comes out, and the city's chanting Spider-Man. I think Spider-Man 3 is the best Spider-Man movie of all time. It definitely carries the most weight, the most meaning. The plot intervenes so well with each character, and that's why I'm saying Spider-Man 3 is the greatest Spider-Man film of all time.
It got a lot of hate about how Venom and Sandman, like having two villains in one movie, was like overwhelming. But like you said, like it created like the perfect parallel.
Perfect parallel. Mm-hmm. And again, a lot of people like to criticize Sandman and Venom, too many characters in a movie. How many characters did we see in a movie like, I don't know, Captain America Civil War? Or not in Captain America Civil War, in Captain America the Winter Soldier. In Captain America the Winter Soldier, we saw Hydra. That itself, the entity itself, it's its own villain. Bucky, it's his own kind of villain. We also saw, what's his name? The guy that was on the computer.
Zemo.
Yeah, Zemo, the scientist guy from the first Captain America movie. Like, we've seen it time and time again where superhero movies have multiple villains. In Avengers Infinity War, you had Thanos, you had the entire Black Order. There were so many villains coming at the Avengers. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's an Avengers movie, it makes sense. But there's been more than two villains in superhero movies in the past before, so that's not even a fair criticism. Brad, how about you? What are your thoughts on Spider-Man 3?
I forgive you for that horrible take.
What?
Been sitting on that for 10 minutes. No, I don't know if you forgot, but Taya agreed and said that Spider-Man 2 was the best Spider-Man film, although she did say she liked Spider-Man 3. Okay. So just want to clarify that. Anyways, Spider-Man 3 was fine. I mean, for me, the direction he went with the dancing and the hair.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like, I thought that was iconic. Like no,
it's iconic.
They were trying to be funny. Like they were trying to be funny with it, and it came off as funny. Like I remember crying tears of laughter when he was doing like the dance.
Yeah, like that lost me, and then just the Venom stuff. Obviously, seeing the Venom we got recently.
Tom Hardy.
With Tom Hardy, like
so good.
That's the Venom we know, right?
Yeah.
And like for that iconic character to come, that's like a Thanos coming for one film and being done, So that was my only grip, where it's like I feel like they threw stuff in knowing it was potentially the last one, and let's go out with a bang. But as far as like fan service goes, like I was like, wow, they threw Venom together in literally 15 minutes. And then that was it. Although that last sequence was epic, and it was iconic to have him swinging in the red and blue suit. You are 100% right. Holding it above the suitcase, yes. That was just a great trilogy, period. They did a really nice job. So I would say that the Andrew Garfield, not trilogy, but that sequence was a lot of fun. That series, the two films, I enjoyed them. I don't know why people hate on them so much. Are they perfect? No, but I really enjoyed Andrew Garfield's version of Spider-Man because it's different than what we saw prior in Tobey's. I love the relationship with Gwen Stacy. That is one of the best on-screen chemistry relationships across really anything.
Yeah.
And Shailene Woodley as Mary Jane. Oh my gosh, that would have been amazing.
Yeah.
Shailene Woodley as Mary Jane. Picture like Fault in Our Stars, but with Andrew Garfield Spider-Man.
Yeah.
That would have been amazing.
Yeah, it would have been cool. But yeah, the action sequences in those two films were great. But yeah, I mean, that's one take that I'll say is like the Andrew Garfield 2 films got so much hate. I don't know why. I enjoyed the films. I thought they were fun. They're not perfect, but no film is. But yeah.
Yeah, and if we look at Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man franchise, like they get so much hate when they were actually pretty good. Like if you watch the Amazing Spider-Man movie, it's an amazing movie. The Amazing Spider-Man 2, it gets more hate than the first film because it had too many villains. But
that sounds familiar. Yeah.
Yeah, but again, the purpose of this Andrew Garfield Spider-Man franchise was to build towards the Sinister Six,
100%.
to build towards Venom. Unlike Spider-Man 3, they were actually building towards something. Like they were built. Sinister Six was right around the corner. So I just felt like the way people view Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man franchise, the way they view it that way, and in such a negative light, is because we didn't get to see the full story. I felt if we got to see the full story play out, Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man in general would be viewed in a completely different light.
Now, here's my question for you guys. Do you think around the time of Amazing Spider-Man 2 or shortly after, the discussions between Marvel and Sony began to get Spider-Man in the MCU, which killed that and then opened up what we have now? Because that's the only thing that makes sense for me, because they were building to the Sinister Six, like you said. So, that's my guess. And I think they were like, look, opportunity to do this. Sorry, Andrew. See you later.
They did him dirty.
Yeah. I mean, Marvel has tried to work with them in the past before.
Yeah.
So we could have even seen Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man in the MCU maybe if the deal actually went down earlier because...
Yeah, but could you imagine Tobey Maguire and Andrew and Tom Holland?
That's what I'm saying. Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and Tom Holland.
Just give it to us. I sent you that photo recently. Someone did like a mock image of all of them standing next to each other from the scene from Amazing Spider-Man 2 where he's about to fight Rhino.
They would mix so well together.
Oh, dude.
You got so Tobey, who's like the mature Spidey. Tom is the kid in all of it. Like, Andrew is just a mix between both of them.
Sarcasm, yeah. And dude, the Sam Raimi's coming back to direct the Multiverse of Madness.
Again, like I've been saying this in the past, I'll say it again. When you introduce the multiverse, anything is possible.
100%. 100%.
Andrew Garfield will come back in a heartbeat.
Dude,
I don't know about Tobey Maguire coming back.
Either of them would come back. Like, are you kidding me?
I don't know, because Toby's known to be like a hard actor to work with. So I don't know if Tobey would come back.
To come back in a MCU film, to make an appearance, to be part of
I think Kevin Feige can do
the universe. Yeah, nobody's going to say no to that, 100%. Yeah. And after the success of Into the Spider-Verse, come on, man. Like, if that happens, hypothetically speaking, Tobey or Andrew come back, make an appearance in the Multiverse of Madness or something else, and it is received well by the fans, which of course it would be, that opens the door to a bigger conversation, to a live action Into the Spider-Verse. And we already know Miles is there.
And we know that they're doing a Madam Web movie. There's no way you do a Madam Web movie and not introduce the Spider-Verse. So they're building towards it slowly but surely, and it's coming. Andrew Garfield, Tobey Maguire. I'm going to clip this in a couple years. Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and Tom Holland will get their own Spider-Man movie. And
you heard it here first. The Supes Disputes.
Yep, it's going to happen. It's
Taya, Supes, me. Let's go.
Exactly. Boom. Just like that. So now we're going to take this conversation and go even more micro. We've discussed who's the best Spider-Man. We've discussed what's the best Spider-Man movie. Now it's time to discuss what is the best Spider-Man fight scene. So this goes beyond, whether or not you like Tom Holland, Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, whether or not you like their movies. It comes down to the action. What is the best Spider-Man fight scene? Again, just to name a few, the train sequence from Spider-Man 2, the final battle of Spider-Man 3. Oh my gosh, the Electro fight scene in The Amazing Spider-Man 2.
That shit was lit.
The Mysterio fight scene in Spider-Man Far From Home. There's so many different fight scenes, but in my opinion, the greatest Spider-Man fight scene of all time is, the Spider-Man 2 fight scene, the train sequence with Doc Ock. Again, I think there were so many different layers to this scene if we just break it down. There was the actual fight with Doc Ock, which was pretty badass. They're on the side of the train. Peter's getting thrown through, again, like you said.
Well, you also have the clock tower before the train.
Yeah.
Like they fell from the tower onto the train. So I kind of include that as well.
And another thing I really liked is how Doc Ock was literally grabbing people and throwing them. And Peter, mid-fight, would have to be like, he would have to grab them and save those people in the air. So that's like a criticism you have for Man of Steel, where Superman wasn't saving people during the middle of his fight with Zod.
No, he was destroying the city.
But it's something that happened in this train sequence for Spider-Man. Don't diss my boy Cavill, bro. I'll diss my die. So again, and then after the fight with Doc Ock, we had the train sequence, which was beautiful. Him stopping the train. And I love how he didn't hesitate to sacrifice his secret identity because he knew that the lives of every single person that was on that train was in danger. And even then, like I said, in the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man trilogy, the city of New York stands behind Spider-Man. And they did in that scene. And it was so beautiful to have Doc Ock enter the train and then all of the New Yorkers standing up for Spider-Man. It was awesome. So, Taya, what do you think is the greatest Spider-Man fight scene?
Oh, gosh. Okay, so my favorite. Okay, so I should start off by saying I'm not a big fight scene person, right? Like, they stress me out. I just get anxiety watching it. So I'm not a huge, like actual fights. I'm not really here for it. My favorite is actually with Venom, like the clock tower, because it shows, like, almost like the nerdier side of Peter Parker, which is my favorite side of Peter Parker, because he figures out how to use, like, the pipes and stuff to create the what's it called, like the sound, whatever it is, the vibrations, in order to destroy Venom. Like, he had to, like, actually use, like, his intelligence to figure out how to destroy him, and I don't know, I really like that.
Wait, in Spider-Man 3 you're talking?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, where he's fighting Venom. Yeah, that was a good one. I think just that whole action sequence, just amazing with Sandman, Harry, Spider-Man. Just the music of that Tobey trilogy is just godly. It's up there amongst the greatest superhero themes of all time. Like, oh my gosh. I don't even really care about Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man actually coming back. I mean, of course I care about that. But I don't care about that as much as I care about, imagine like a portal opening up in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and then you hear that Spider-Man theme kick in for the Tobey trilogy. Oh my God. Bro. People are going to catch my body in the theater, I swear. I might jump a few rows forward. But anyways, guys, today we've talked about so much. We've talked about the best Spider-Man
movie.
Don't
ask me. It's fine.
Oh. I thought you agreed with me with the train sequence.
Here. It's like I'm not even here.
Brad, what is the greatest Spider-Man fight scene?
Obviously, the train sequence is good. We know that. I did really like the Electro fight. The slow-mo bits where he's like...
So good.
Oh, dude, that was
web swinging.
That was electric.
Yep.
Come on, Taya.
Oh my
come
God.
on. Jeez. Anyway, sorry.
That's a song.
That was really, really well done. I know it wasn't a solo film, but his fight with Thanos, epic. That was really cool, where he was using the portals with Strange and beating the shit out of him. It was very brief, but it was still cool nonetheless. And then that we talked about Mysterio. Like, that was the drones, everything was just the scale of that. You know, if Mysterio makes a joke saying it was a Avengers level threat, I mean, yeah, like it was a big time deal. So the fight sequence there was iconic, but yeah, I would say definitely the train sequence, the Electro fight, and now Mysterio. For
sure. I mean, the fight scenes in Spider-Man Far From Home were spectacular. I think that was some of the best Spider-Man action we've ever seen in a Spider-Man movie, because not only did we get that final boss fight with Mysterio, that illusion fight sequence, one of the greatest superhero scenes of all time.
Yeah,
honestly,
hands down. Visually too, just stunning.
Stunning. I mean, that when I saw that in theaters, it kind of brought me back to when I first saw Doctor Strange, because Doctor Strange was that movie was so crazy in terms of the visual effects, and I got those vibes with Spider-Man Far From Home with a character like Mysterio. Now moving forward to Spider-Man 3. We're hearing some whispers here and there that Kraven is rumored to be the villain for Spider-Man 3. We know Scorpion is going to be one of the villains of Spider-Man 3. So I'm super excited to see the fight sequences. If Kraven were to be the villain of Spider-Man 3, I would die for the action sequences to see Kraven chasing Tom Holland's Spider-Man, and he's super scared. And I cannot wait.
We talked about it on a phone call the other day. I was saying I would love Spider-Man 3 to start out where Peter's literally running from something. Like it is a like psychological thriller horror element where it's like the film just starts on fire and you're just like, what the hell is going on? And it just sets the tone that like he's being chased from the first second of this film to the last second, because everybody knows he's Spider-Man now. So anybody that he caught, beat, whatever, from the beginning when he was wearing his homemade suit before he met Tony till the end of Far From Home, he has a lot of villains and a lot of people are pissed at him. Not to mention the ones that are behind the scenes, such as Norman Osborn or Kingpin. I mean, like, it could be endless. We don't know who's all there.
If we look at a character like Iron Man who mentored Spider-Man, how many characters or villains did Iron Man create? And we didn't even see him face off against that character.
Yeah. So
now I think this kind of shifts the conversation to Spider-Man 3, which is something I wanted to ask you guys. Besides that, what do you want to see in Spider-Man 3? Taya, you could go first.
I just want to see Peter become Peter, I guess, like be the nerd that he is, you know. That's like, again, that's my favorite element of Peter Parker, is just the nerdy, like, shy kid that he is, and I want to see more of that.
For me, I want to see him become a man. I want to see him become Spider-Man. First of all, I want Happy to die. I love Happy as a character, but I think him dying would really just cut off all the loose ends that Peter has in terms of people he can reach out to. Then it just leaves Aunt May there, so maybe he has to go to Aunt May. Please, God, John Watts, if you're watching this, please. Anyways, again, I want Peter to suffer. I want this to be the Spider-Man movie that doesn't play any games. I want Peter to have real consequences. I want them to kill off characters. And again, it's all in service of building up Peter's character to the point where he is Spider-Man. And again, I'm very critical of Tom Holland's Spider-Man. I don't think he's the best Spider-Man. And I love Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire more than Tom Holland's Spider-Man. But I think when it's all said and done, there won't be a debate. I think when it's all said and done, Tom Holland will be the best Spider-Man. And that's because we're going to see him the longest. We're going to see him grow continuously over time. So I'm just super excited for Spider-Man 3. Again, I want to see him suffer. I don't want to see him die. I want to see other characters die that are close to him. And I want to see him man up and go after whoever kills those characters with a vengeance. But, you know,
I think it's going to be dark.
Yeah, that's what I want it to. I want it to be dark. I don't want it to be like lighthearted.
I think it's going to be like Infinity War in many ways, where it just felt like a horror film.
Or like Civil War. Like Civil War.
Dark.
Super dark.
Yeah, and that would be incredible because, like you're saying, you know, I think characters need to die. I think Ned, Happy, I think even Aunt May. Like, if you really want to have that character development, it's not just one; it's many.
I mean,
everybody closest to Peter.
I don't want them to kill off Aunt May, but if they kill off both Aunt May and Happy, let's say Aunt May and Happy are like on a date and then they die together.
Yeah. If
they were to do that, then Peter's like really like on his own. He has to struggle.
100%.
He has to struggle now financially. He has to worry, where is he going to sleep while still going to school and, still retaining his social life.
Yeah.
It just puts more on Peter's shoulders. And I think that's what the character Spider-Man does best. He carries the world on his shoulders and he still stands up. He still shows up time and time again.
And that's the thing. It's not just the fact that the villains and enemies of Spider-Man know he's Peter Parker, but they also know, because he's Peter Parker, they know everybody in his circle now.
Yeah.
So everyone's a target.
Yeah.
So that to me is exciting because, yeah, Aunt May could eat it. Happy, like Ned, MJ, like everyone's going to be on high alert.
In the Civil War comics, where Peter unveils his secret identity to the world next to Tony Stark, in the Civil War comics, in one of the follow-up comics, Aunt May dies. She gets assassinated because people know who Peter Parker is. So could we possibly see that in Spider-Man 3? I mean, it's definitely a possibility.
I really hope it's dark. I really hope they come out of the gates on fire. I don't want a slow burn. I want this thing ignited from the second it starts. Like Infinity War. Like when we started that film, you already heard the audio in the intro where it was like, we're under attack. Like it was, yeah, like that's the kind of film I want, where it's right out of the gates, it's hitting you in the mouth and saying this is not going to be a fun ride for you.
Yeah. For me, again, I thought Spider-Man Far From Home was going to be that movie where we feel like the weight of the world on Peter's shoulders and he finally mans up and becomes a man and he doesn't feel like Iron Man Jr. anymore. But for me, Spider-Man Far From Home didn't do that. So I want it to be Spider-Man 3. I want Spider-Man 3 to feel like the whole world is coming down on Peter's shoulders and he doesn't have Happy. He doesn't have Iron Man.
I will say Far From Home was a step in the right direction.
I will say that.
It wasn't the full jump. It wasn't the full jump you're looking for. But now in this film, he's on his own.
Yeah.
There's nobody there. There will be consequences, dark ones. And I can't wait. I think it's going to be the best Spider-Man film we've seen.
Me too. Because we've seen Tom Holland Spider-Man in 5 movies, and we still don't have that satisfaction of, you know, feeling like the weight of the world is on his shoulders, and he's still manning up and being Spider-Man. Now, when we finally get it in Spider-Man 3, it's going to be so much more satisfying. And that's why I'm excited for Spider-Man 3. But guys, let me know in the comment section down below. Why are you excited for Spider-Man 3? Who do you think is the best Spider-Man of all time? Who do you think is the best, or what do you think is the best Spider-Man movie of all time? And what do you think is the greatest Spider-Man fight sequence of all time? Let me know in the comment section down below. And make sure to duet these TikToks over there on the TikTok platform, and we will respond. So with that being said, thank you guys for tuning in. Again, make sure to check out the Supes Black Panther charity shirts on wearesupes.com. Link is in the description. Make sure to check out Taya's content. Links in the description. With that being said, thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Supes Disputes, and we'll see you guys next week.